Raise your hand if you've met a challenge, you got a little nervous, and you just did enough to get by rather than being in your optimal self. Perhaps you did okay, perhaps you did very well, but you fell short of the heights you know you're capable of. I'm sure we all have. And we often settle for these experiences. Yet what if we met these same challenges with enough effortlessness and poise that our performance simply flowed through us? I remember playing a tennis tiebreak. It was the junior national championships, and I was playing against the number 2 seed, and I wasn't expected to win, yet I was playing some of the best tennis of my life. I was totally in the zone, and it felt fantastic. Everything I wanted to hit was going exactly where it was going. And I remember my opponent had hit a deep shot into the corner, and it was as if someone had pressed pause on the remote, and I simply witnessed my body take over and stretch further than I thought it could reach, and at the last moment, flick my wrist. As I watched the ball sail around the net, I could see my opponent's head and shoulders dip into defeat, and the crowd expectantly waiting to clap. And as the ball sailed right into that 1-inch square that I pre-envisaged, nothing else existed in the world other than this moment and this point. I heard the crowd, and I suddenly realized, wow, I'm 6 levels up. 1 more point, and I get to win. How amazing would it be to impress these onlookers and hit another great shot? And with these thoughts, my whole experience changed. It was as if someone had pressed fast forwards on the remote, and suddenly the ball came to me so fast, bang, hit the top of the racket and went up into the air. I got a little nervous and started to tell myself, come on, you can do this. Started to get frustrated. And I lost the fluency that I had. I started to push it, and I lost the accuracy that I had. I told myself, come on, whatever you do, you must win. As I sat there, preparing to serve, my heart beating, I was more concerned about what everyone else was thinking. What the crowd was thinking, what my coach was thinking. What would happen if I lose? How embarrassing would it be to be 6 levels up and lose this tiebreak? As I threw the ball up in the air, I hit a nervous serve and it got knocked for a winner. Devastated, we changed ends, and I threw a towel over my head to escape this reality. I thought, how had I been playing some of the best tennis in my life and things flowing through me, and now I'm crippled by fear, and this is the last place I want to be. I was suddenly awakened to the fact that I had no control over my internal experience. And as I sat there flip-flopping between things flowing through me and being crippled by fear, I suddenly realized that the more I focused on the former, the better I felt. And the more I prioritized the quality of my internal experience, the more the need to win disappeared, the more the fear disappeared. And realizing that I did have the power to choose my internal experience. I felt empowered, and I threw the towel off, and I went on to play some great tennis. And to realize that we hold the reins to the richness of our experience was nothing short of earth-shattering for me. And for the people I work with, to realize that we have a choice beyond our normal waking experience is life-changing. It might sound simple, but if we prioritize the quality of our eternal experience, even during the crux of a challenge, whether that's a confronting conversation, being held at gunpoint, or even doing a TEDx presentation, we can change how we focus, how we think, how we feel, how we act. Our decision-making can improve, and our performance can improve. And my fascination led me to examine optimal experience, and what is evident is that our most fulfilling moments do not come from chasing happiness or bouncing from one sensationalized hit at the weekend to another. They come from a deep engagement and overcoming worthwhile challenges. And at the top of this experiential tree is a state that science calls flow, a state of total internal congruency, a harmony that allows us to become so engaged in activity that the world around us melts away. And we emerge surprised by what we've just achieved, like my tennis shot. It is a state that pushes us out of our comfort zone to learn, to grow, develop new skills, become more complex and capable human beings. It is a state with over 40 years of research. It's well linked with well-being, engagement, motivation, performance, and creativity. However, despite the long academic history, what I've also found is that there's a giant mismatch practically between our desire for it and our quest to find it. We talk about being in the zone, being in the sweet spot, being on fire, but rarely do we take time to isolate it, dissect it, understand it, learn from it, and then specifically train for it. And when we do, what we realize is that flow is a unique state. It's separate from our peak experiences where we might feel exceptionally high but not be in an optimal space. And equally, it's separate from our peak performances. After all, we can achieve a predetermined outcome but not be in an optimal space. Importantly is that although flow shows up most noticeably in these intense one-off experiences that we can remember for a lifetime, they show up in our day-to-day that ordinarily go overlooked. Perhaps we're cooking and we're juggling the pans and we lose track of time and we're suddenly surprised by what we've created. We're writing our emails and suddenly an email writes itself and wow, surprised by what we've written. And it's in our realization for the opportunities for flow in our day-to-day in these mild moments that life becomes really interesting. Can you remember a time when you were so engaged in an activity that action awareness merged and you popped out surprised by what you had achieved? Well, if we're to meet Aristotle's call and find and live with our true self, then surely finding more optimal experiences in our life is a good way to go. It sounds simple, right? But unfortunately, it isn't. In fact, our mind and body is engineered to act in almost the opposite manner when we face a challenge. It wasn't long ago our predecessors were facing life-threatening situations every time we came out of our cave. And nowadays, when we perceive a threat to our competence or our comfort, our mind and body reacts in the same way. Alarm bell goes off in our limbic system, our heart rate starts to go up, and our sympathetic nervous system takes over and sends blood to our extremities, preparing us for war. And although this can help momentarily to make us alert and sharpen our attention, it tightens the very muscles we need to be relaxed to meet our optimal experiences. And thanks to our embodied cognition and our developed prefrontal cortex, it's not just the body that becomes rigid. Our mindset becomes rigid and restrained as well. Coupled with our innate desire for order, to control the important things in life, such as making sure we put that butter in exactly the right place in the fridge every time. When the pressure rises, this innate desire for order starts to control the context, tries to control the future in the hope of feeling better and performing better. And as a result, we end up constantly reacting between the difference between what we're expecting and what is actually happening. And as a result, we miss the opportunity to manage our moment-to-moment experience entirely. We only have to hold our breath for 10 seconds, go up to someone we fancy, to feel these psycho-physiological responses. And when our greatest opportunities arise, we act like pre-programmed robots and have these mild or intense fight, flight, freeze reactions. For example, imagine you're rock climbing with some friends, enjoying the day and you're smelling that fresh air and you're in awe of these magnificent mountains. You're climbing up, you're halfway up and you're holding on by your fingertips, maybe a shaky foothold. You look down, you suddenly realize you're 200 feet off the ground. The mind goes, don't fall off. I must make it to the top. And we go to these predetermined outcomes in the hope of feeling better and performing better. But what happens is we overgrip. We tighten the very muscles we need to be relaxed and fluid and find that innovation to reach the rock. And this is a great analogy for all of us, because when those challenges rise, we often push on and we find a grit to make it to the top. But instead of getting there and being in awe of this optimal experience that we've just had, we're relieved. Thank God I made it to the top. Whereas in flow, we have a completely different experience. Our mind is governed by a different cognitive system. Our heart rate has more coherence. And instead of reacting from our thoughts or reacting from our emotions or reacting from our inherited instincts, we're able to act through intuitive action. Yet responding in flow is not the norm. When our greatest challenges could be our greatest opportunities, we often sell ourselves short. And to change this equation, we have to move. We have to realize that the messages of old, of push harder, force it, no pain, no gain, peak performance comes at the detriment of our internal experience, are outdated. They might produce short-term compliance, but they add fear, they add stress. They add chaos in our consciousness and lead to the psycho-physiological responses of mild and intense fight, flight, or freeze reactions. Check your own experience. Have you pushed for that next toy, that next outcome, or an extrinsic gain such as money, status, fame, the perfect tick box partner, only to once having got there, feeling slightly dissatisfied with it, slightly unfulfilled? Sure, we all have. Yet this industrialized mindset of prioritizing external over internal, productivity over presence, and outcome over process is a problem. It negates the very self-management, self-optimization required for us to meet our optimal experiences. It adds stress. And it forms dysfunctional patterns. And as a result, we have created a society in which 70% of employees are disengaged. 75% of teenage girls overstress about their exams. Anxiety is an issue for 5-year-olds at school. And unless we do something about it, these statistics are only getting worse. Because we don't have functional patterns to deal with our challenges in an optimal fashion, 45% of people in this audience will have a mental health-related issue in our lifetime. This is not acceptable. We've got to move from just surviving to thriving. Thankfully, modern research provides us a turning point. Yes, we're biologically shaped, but we have the power to rewire our brains and change how we react. And it's not only joy that's found in the journey, but it's optimal functioning too. For example, under pressure, outcome goals are more effective than process goals are more effective than outcome goals. And in my work as a flow coach, I'm privileged to work with world champions, leaders, and aspiring professionals. And what we find is that if they adopt these 3 simple steps, they're able to find more optimal experiences in their life. They're able to change cultures and help other people find their optimal experiences more frequently. And as a result, they're able to feel better, perform better, reconnect in their relationships, leave the house without wearing makeup, allow themselves to become world champions, and even start enjoying exams. Imagine that. Firstly, mindset. If we can prioritize flow and the quality of our internal experience, we can empower ourselves to change towards an optimal experience. Secondly, preparation. If we are to find more optimal experiences in our life, then we can't simply expect our mind and body to deliver. We need to train our mind and body to deal with pressure and master the ability to clear the cache in our consciousness before we go to act. And thirdly, immersion. If we are to move to a higher level of consciousness, then we need to remove ourselves from this conscious control that keeps us in our normal waking consciousness. We need to get to a state where things are flowing through us, where we're letting it happen rather than making things happen. So the next time you face a challenge, adopt this simple paradigm shift. Instead of focusing on this predetermined outcome or the fear and the rhetoric around it, prioritize flow and the quality of your experience. It might feel countercultural or even counterproductive, but it works. Instead of these many fight, flight, freeze responses, we can find flow. And with flow as our true north, you will feel better, you will perform better, and most importantly, you will pass down a powerful blueprint to the next generation. Thank you.